Welcome to Tracing Your Family Roots. I'm Chuck Mason, and with me today is my co-host and guest, Janelle Blue. Before we get started, because we run short of time, we want to thank the Mount Vernon Genealogical Society who sponsors the show. We want to thank our producer, Sydney Sachs, and all of the staff that comes in, volunteers, and puts the show together every time that we tape. It's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that they do for us to present the program for you. And Janelle, I understand you were in Ireland not too long ago.
I was, specifically Dublin. And what a wonderful place that is. Yes. What a wonderful city. It is so beautiful, and there's lots to do. There's bars, and there's distilleries, and there's museums, and there's the River Liffey, and beautiful place, wonderful people. Everybody was so welcoming, and you just wonder, why did your ancestors want to leave such a beautiful place?
Was there genealogy?
There was, and that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. But I think before we talk about some resources and some repositories, let's do a little backup on brushing up on a little bit of Irish history, because I think there are some people who are still a little bit vague on, what's Northern Ireland, what's the Republic of Ireland, how did all that happen? And of course, if you don't know where your Irish ancestor came from,
that's me,
then there are some clues that we can talk about that might help you a little bit. Now, if you already know the county or the village where your ancestor came from, and you're going to go to Dublin or to Ireland at all, contact that local genealogical or historical society there in that county and go for it. You don't need to go to the archives for that.
Do most of the counties have societies?
They have something.
Something.
Okay. Just like in the States. There's depending on the size, right, and their prominence within the state. But if you're really struggling with, I have no idea where they came from,
that's me,
then there's some things you can think about. And so I want to back up a little bit and talk about, the Irish were always upset with the British. Actually, the Irish, long before the Brits, there were other, the Vikings, all this history. They were constantly tossed back and forth. But when Britain took over, when England took over, then they were also very unhappy about that, but they had no choice. So in the 1600s, the king said, we need to do something about all of these rebellious people that are right on our border in Northern Ireland, which is, it's like almost a contiguous border there, and we need to do something about it. So he said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to displace the crofters by inviting the Scots to come in. Mm-hmm. And over the Irish Sea, there's only about 13 miles between Scotland and the coast of Northern Ireland. So it was pretty easy to transport all these people and colonize what was called the Ulster Plantation, or the Plantation of Ulster.
Okay.
It goes both ways. And so they just displaced all these Irish people that were there and took away their land. The Scots took over. He also welcomed any Britons who wanted to come in too, but he just wanted to get some of the power out of the Irish because he wanted to settle them down.
Right.
The Scots stayed there for over 100 years. And if you know the term Scots-Irish, that's what it's all about. It's those lowland Scots, not the Highlanders, but the lowlanders who went in and established the Ulster Plantation. over 100 years later, England is still messing around, and they, now it's a very prominent flax producer in that area. And the kings start messing around with the tariffs and the taxes and the prohibitions and the whatevers. And so the people said, whoops, there's an opening in America, I think we'll go there. And so that was from about 1717 to about 1775. That's when about 200,000 Scots Irish went to America. Now, remember, the Scots-Irish, because they were right there on the English border, they were pretty much Presbyterians, or Protestants of some sort. They weren't Catholic, which is the other part of Ireland. So they immigrated, they were here, 1775 conjures up the idea of the American Revolution, right? And so, and I've read where the Scots-Irish were very pro-American independence. And so they were right in the middle of it. They wanted to fight, and in fact, there were several who signed the Declaration of Independence, and there were several just Irish who also did that too. So it wasn't just the Scots-Irish who came, but it was the predominant. So, so they were here, and if you have an ancestor who probably was Protestant and probably was Presbyterian, and you know that because they're still Presbyterian today, and you also have found them in the U.S. Census well before the 1850s, there's a really good chance that they came from one of those 6 counties in Ulster. Those counties, and especially Armagh is one of them, Tyrone, Fermanagh, and I'm not pronouncing that right, County Down, and Derry, or Londonderry. Those are the 6 counties that were made up of that Ulster plantation and that later became Northern Ireland. So that gives you some clues of where to look.
Yes.
And you don't have to look all over the country because...
My problem is they came much later and they were Catholic.
All right, well, there's a clue. So that's a great segue into my next point. And that is that in the 1840s, Ireland, the sort of the south and the east part of Ireland, were just going through some really tough times. England was hard on them. They had really repressive laws. There were several potato famine. It wasn't just that last one that did them in. It had been recurring periodically. And the problem with the potato famine was there were other countries who this blight had sort of progressed, and it started like in Belgium, and it went to the Netherlands, and it was in England. But when it got to Ireland, the Irish were so dependent on their potatoes, that it could devastate everything that they had in their pantry and that had stored for the winter. So they had nothing to eat. And it's my understanding that this blight could, within a week, it could turn the potatoes to mush. Well, if they had nothing to eat and they did anything to try to go out and procure something to eat, and somebody thought it was against the law, the next thing you know, they're in trouble with the law, and then they go to the poorhouse, and it was a horrible situation. So in the 1840s, this period between 1843 and about 1849, Ireland they had about 6 million people in their population, and they lost a third of it. And that third made up 1 million people died of starvation, of exposure, just horrible. The rest of them emigrated. They got the heck out. They didn't all come to America, but the majority of them did.
I know a number of people who have ancestors from Ireland that came during the potato famine, and it's just, you know, and of course I know some others that were Scotch-Irish, and of course, you know, they came into Philadelphia and then kind of wandered on down into the Shenandoah Valley and all. So, yeah, if my Irish ancestors came, either time frame I might have an idea, but I have no idea when my great-grandmother came, whether she was actually born here or back in Ireland.
Well, you know, as genealogists, we always work with hypothesize our ideas, and so you could start with some hypothetical assumption that
I've tried playing with that, and there's just no records. I have joked with Sharon Hodges, who's been a guest on, that the spaceship came down and dropped them off and went away, because, you know, the one record, the earliest record that I have of my great-grandparents is their marriage record in Jersey City, New Jersey. But, you know, the vital records, the census records before that marriage, nothing.
Well, and that happens. I mean, you know, that, I guess you're just going to have to keep that as an open case.
I kind of keep that
a cold case
on the sideline as a cold case, and periodically I'll pull it out and look at it and see, is there anything new that's become available? But, you know, I did 20 years worth of city directories looking for them. They don't appear in any of them.
Well,
yet I know they were there.
They probably were from the south or the east of Ireland, and if they were Catholic, more than likely. At least you're not looking in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I know that it's my father's mother, and it's her mother that is the Irish.
The Irish.
Whether she was an immigrant or born here, I don't know. But, you know, that part I know for sure. But beyond that, it just is one of those that it's like the black hole opened up and they appeared.
So if you're going to Dublin, then there are some things that you can look at. In 1922, the Republic of Ireland gained their independence. They became a country, completely outside of the rule of England. In fact, they're part of the European Union now. So, you know, there are people who get Northern Ireland and the Republic mixed up, but these are two completely distinct countries now. But right before they gained their independence, like the same year, you know, there was a lot of turmoil going on, lots of resistance. I think almost everybody knows that there's been that kind of thing going on for years. Now, that's not the troubles that happened in Northern Ireland in the 30s. This was in the 20s. Well, they had a place called the Four Courts, which was the repository and the place where all the records were kept. And the court records, all the chancery, the Supreme Court, everything, and then also the exchequer, which is the taxation records. There was a huge explosion, and it destroyed millions of documents that could never be totally replaced, at least not the originals.
Right.
So if you go to the Public Records Office of Ireland, which is in Dublin now, all you're going to find for census records are 1901 and 1911. That's it. Yeah. And you know, census are just the bread and butter of genealogy.
So they haven't opened the 1921 ones, or do they not exist yet?
I'm not.
Okay.
Really.
I know that there is a 100-year, like we have the 72-year law. There's a 100-year law that the censuses can't be viewed publicly.
You know, if your ancestor came after that time, then you know you're going to have access to other things. But I'm talking about, you know, anybody who was in that wave. Those waves that I'm talking about are any later. You know, those are gone forever. Now, they do have the Griffiths valuations, and those are basically where everybody lived. They documented the structures, they documented who was there and the valuations, and of course that's for tax purposes mostly.
And they can be quite helpful to people. I mean, I know other people that both in England and in Ireland have used those. I mean, I've listened particularly for Irish research. I've attended a number of lectures and things, and then talking to other people that were in lectures and all that. They have been quite helpful to people if you can get the handle on when they came over to the United States and where they may have come from. The problem that I have.
Yep, exactly. So, not everything was lost. And one of the most important things is that there was a person who took an inventory of everything before the explosion. And those documents survived. So they know what they don't have. And they are in the process of rebuilding all of that. Because, sometimes documents were kept in more than one place. And so you might be able to then rely on a different, it might not be the exact original, but it's close enough.
Or other documents may at least have part of the picture in them that you can reconstruct. Sort of like they have done out in St. Louis with the military records that burned there in, I think it was 1973. They're trying to, anything that they can get their hands on, reconstruct files.
They have an organization, and I'm going to try to find the name of it, that is now they are reconstructing all of this, and they intend to put every bit of it online for all the public to see. So everything that they're gathering now will never be lost again unless you lose your Wi-Fi or something.
Right.
And so that's really a great project, but it's going to take years to rebuild that.
Yeah.
Now, there are some other things that you can find at this Public Records Office, and that is some of the Church of England records, the vitals, were lost. And by the way, they had all the Church of England and Church of Ireland were the Church of Ireland was supposed to send all of their records, but fortunately they didn't all comply. And so not all of them have been lost, but many have. The Catholic records were never required to be sent.
Right.
So those are in a different place, and you can perhaps find those. Certainly the Protestant ones were not required either. So it was really, it was just the Church of Ireland. And when I say Protestant, I mean the Presbyterian.
Presbyterian, right.
So there's still plenty of church records out there, and there are websites that you can go to look for those. The Irish Family History Center, the General Records Office is the central repository for civil records. So that started in 1864. So I don't know if you've checked there. That might have been after they were already here, but there were civil records of marriages, births, deaths, that sort of thing.
My problem is my great-grandmother's name was Mary Carroll, or it could have been O'Carroll.
Oh dear.
You know how common that is.
Gosh. Well, that's one of the things that's important to do is make sure that you got the right person.
Yes.
Do you know her, do you have any idea of what the birth date was, though?
I have a birth date for her, and I want to say it was around mid-1860, around 64, 65, if I remember correctly. I haven't looked at
Okay.
anything recently.
Okay.
And, so I have her supposed birth date and age when she married.
So that would have been before the General
yeah.
Records Office started keeping vitals.
Yeah.
So too bad.
And of course, like I say, I still don't know whether she was born here or in Ireland.
Yeah, yeah.
know.
She was Presbyterian or Catholic?
No,
Catholic.
she was Catholic.
Yeah.
She was Catholic.
Well,
Right.
and you've tried the Catholic churches.
No, because, well, I have for my grandmother and her siblings, but they were married in an Episcopal church.
Okay.
He was German,
Ah,
and so he wasn't a member of the church. In fact, they're buried in two different cemeteries. She's buried in the Catholic cemetery, and he's buried in a non-denominational cemetery, because obviously he didn't turn Catholic, but my grandmother and her siblings were all raised in the Catholic Church,
Okay.
and the siblings all stayed. My grandmother left the church in 1915, so she left it before. She married my grandfather in a Methodist church in 1914.
okay.
So,
Well, I also want to point out that there is another public records office. It's called Prony, and that is in Northern Ireland. Now, they don't have it either because at that point, right, they were part of Ireland. The Dublin was the main archives. So a lot of your Scots-Irish information from Northern Ireland is going to be gone too. But if you ever get to Ulster, that certainly is a place to go.
Yeah.
And they may not have, they've got the Griffiths valuations too there. But their focus is Ulster.
well, actually, Griffiths valuation they can also access here.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
right. But Prony is, if you've ever been to the Ulster Historic Society, they do the annual roadshow where they come to
Right.
the United
Yeah.
States, and if you ever have that in your neighborhood, in your community, then by all means go there.
We have done it, the Fairfax Society has done it
Right.
2 or 3 times.
Right, that's correct.
Here, but
But-
it's
but
been a
they-
while since they came.
Yeah. No, actually, it was just a couple of years ago when the
Was-
Fairfax did it. Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, so you'll see a lot of Northern Ireland stuff there, and they've got some really special collections that I guess somehow never got sent over. But the vitals, it's the same problem. They lost a lot of their documents too there. So I've talked about the Public Records Office, the General Records Office. There's also the church. There's a church place there where you can go to get church records. Finally, I want to talk about the EPIC, the Irish Immigration Museum called EPIC. And it just was established a few years ago, but if you get to Dublin and you don't have time to do anything else, at least go there
that.
because it is fabulous and it is so high tech that you're going to do a lot. You're going to meet a lot of animated immigrants who
Okay.
tell their story, and these are based on real people who left, and they'll tell you why they left, and then what happened to them. And so there's like 6 different ones. But it's got like 20 stations, and you go through these different stations, starting with the history of Ireland. And believe me, these are easy, entertaining kinds of things, but they're very instructional. And so then you meet the immigrants, you find out what happened to them once they immigrated, then you begin to see the culture and what the contributions were, and it goes through how much influence the Irish culture had on the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because of their inventors, their writers, their influencers in many ways, artists. Gene Kelly. I mean, he was mentioned as
Right.
one, and you know, Joseph Kennedy was one, and so many writers who really influenced a lot. So, at the very end, they show Riverdance, and they have steps on the floor so that you can practice doing that jig or whatever that Riverdance
is.
clog thing is. And so you really get a sense of Ireland and Irish history. And of course, the purpose of the thing is to promote Ireland. There's no question about that. But it's also very instructional. They give you a passport when you sign in, when you pay your admission. And then when you go through each one of those stations, it says, now don't forget to stamp your passport. And there's a little thing where you can have it stamped. So at the end, you know, it shows you've been through all of the little stations. And it's just it's of all museums, this one is really one that I would definitely recommend.
It sounds like it's really unique.
It is. And I think because it's so new, you know, they have used as much technology and AI in some cases to try to bring these people to life. They've used everything that's right here at our fingertips today.
And unfortunately, we've run out of time as usual.
No. Well, I hope you've enjoyed traveling through Ireland a little bit.
Yeah, I have a number of friends that have Irish ancestors, and some still have family back there, distant family back there. And you know, I've heard stories and all. Be a great place to visit. I just would like to visit somewhere where my ancestors were from, if I could ever find that out.
There's one more thing, in the few remaining moments, is when you go to that museum, attached to that museum is a family history center, and they have genealogists on site who will help you, and you pay them a fee for an hour's worth of help. But it might be a way to get started. And so don't forget to go into that place as well.
One resource just here in the United States, the McLean Family History Center, has a huge British Isles collection.
Okay.
They have Griffith's valuation and lots of other things there.
So that would be a place to
That
go.
would be a place for people locally to get a start if they're looking for things. So, well, thank you, Janelle, for joining us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yes.